The invitation arrived on heavy cardstock with gold foil lettering, Horizon Innovations, 5 years of excellence, addressed to Ms. Cora Green. Not mom, not mother, certainly not the woman who had gone hungry so they could eat. Just Cora Green, like I was some distant acquaintance they were obligated to include. I stood in my modest kitchen, morning light filtering through the worn curtains I'd sewn myself 15 years ago, and studied the elaborate invitation. The company logo, their precious creation, embossed in the corner. The Ritz-Carlton downtown. Black tie optional. RSVP required. My son Lucas's handwriting at the bottom. We thought you might enjoy seeing what real accomplishment looks like. I set the invitation down and finished my coffee, which had gone cold. The silence of my small house enveloped me like an old friend. After Raymond died 11 years ago, the silence had been an enemy, a reminder of everything I'd lost. Now it was the only honest thing in my life. I glanced at the wall calendar where I'd marked my next shift at the hospital. 40 years as a nurse, the last 12 in geriatrics after Raymond's medical bills forced me back to work. I should have been retired by now, traveling maybe, or at least tending my garden without the bone-deep exhaustion that followed 12-hour shifts at 73. The invitation wasn't a peace offering. It was a taunt. Lucas and Rebecca, my twins, had left home at 18 for college. Scholarships I'd helped them secure through endless nights of application reviews and essay edits. They'd barely looked back, except when they needed something. Money for apartments in better neighborhoods, loans for graduate school that somehow never got repaid, and finally, 6 years ago, seed money for their revolutionary healthcare logistics platform that would disrupt the entire medical supply chain. I knew something about medical supply chains after 4 decades in hospitals. I also knew something about my children. They were brilliant, driven, and utterly convinced of their own exceptionalism. What they didn't know was that mothers see through the facades their children construct. I saw Lucas's desperation beneath his confidence, Rebecca's insecurity beneath her sharp tongue. "Mom, this is our one shot," Lucas had said 6 years ago, sitting at this very kitchen table. "Everyone who gets in early is going to make a fortune." Rebecca had nodded eagerly. "We just need enough to get through the first year of development. We have investors lined up, but they want to see some skin in the game from us." I'd looked at their eager faces, so like Raymond's when he'd get excited about something, and felt the familiar tug of maternal sacrifice. "How much do you need?" The number they named would have emptied my retirement account. Not the paltry 401k from the hospital, but Raymond's life insurance money I'd been carefully growing for over a decade. My safety net. My future. "You'll be a silent partner," Rebecca had promised. "When we go public, you'll get it all back tenfold." They hadn't visited in the 2 years before that day, hadn't called on my birthday, hadn't asked about my health or if I was lonely or if I needed anything. But they'd shown up with business plans and projections, dressed in clothes that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I should have seen it then. I gave them the money. All of it. They promised paperwork to formalize my investment. It never came. The first year, I got occasional updates. The second year, just Christmas cards with no personal messages. By year 3, my calls went to voicemail. My texts received one-word replies. I saw their company in the local business journal. Rising stars, under 40. There they were, my twins, polished and prosperous in designer clothes, standing in a sleek office I'd never been invited to visit. The article mentioned angel investors and venture capital. Not a word about their mother, the nurse who'd emptied her future to give them their start. I didn't confront them. What would be the point? I picked up extra shifts instead, ignored the arthritis in my hands, and adjusted to the idea of working until I couldn't stand anymore. Now this invitation, this mockery. I picked up my phone and called Sarah, my one real friend who'd stood by me through everything. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice warm with concern. "They invited you? After all this time?" she asked when I told her. "To rub my nose in it, I think," I replied, keeping my voice even. "To show me what they've accomplished without me." Sarah's sigh carried years of witnessed hurts. "Are you going to go?" Was I? Part of me wanted to tear the invitation to shreds. Another part, The mother who remembered two dark-haired toddlers running to me with outstretched arms, wanted one more chance to see them in their element, to witness what they'd become, even if they'd become it by stepping on my back. "I think I will," I said finally. "Cora," Sarah's voice turned serious, "don't let them hurt you again." "I won't," I promised, though I wasn't sure how I would prevent it. After we hung up, I sat with the invitation for a long time. 5 years of their company. 5 years since they'd effectively disappeared from my life. 5 years of me working doubles while they built their empire on my investment. I opened my laptop, an old, sluggish thing that protested with every click, and searched for Horizon Innovations. Their website was slick and impressive, revolutionizing healthcare logistics through proprietary AI solutions. Photos of gleaming offices. A team page where Lucas and Rebecca smiled confidently at the camera. And there, buried in the About Us section, was a list of their major partnerships. Fourth from the top, Peterson Capital. My heart stopped. Peterson Capital was the investment firm that Caleb Peterson had started after leaving Henderson Financial. Caleb, who had been Raymond's best friend for 30 years. Caleb, who had helped me invest Raymond's life insurance money after his death. Caleb, who called me every month to check in, who brought me soup when I had pneumonia last winter, who had become my financial advisor and, though neither of us had ever acted on it, perhaps something more. Caleb had never mentioned investing in my children's company, but then I'd never told him about giving them my retirement money. Some misplaced sense of maternal pride, perhaps, or shame at being so thoroughly discarded afterward. I picked up my phone again and dialed a different number. "Cora," Caleb answered warmly. "I was just thinking about you. How are you?" "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Caleb, do you have a few minutes to talk? In person?" A pause. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "I'm not sure," I said honestly, "but I need your advice." We arranged to meet at the small cafe near his office downtown the next day. After hanging up, I looked again at the invitation on my counter. "What real accomplishment looks like," I repeated Lucas's words aloud to my empty kitchen. I thought of my aching hands after 12-hour shifts changing bedpans and administering medications. I thought of the patients whose hands I'd held as they took their last breaths because their families couldn't be bothered to show up. I thought of raising 2 children alone after their father died, working 2 jobs, making sure they had everything they needed to succeed. For the first time in years, I felt something other than resignation or quiet disappointment when thinking about my children. I felt anger. Cold, clarifying anger that straightened my spine and lifted my chin. I picked up the invitation and wrote a single word on the RSVP card. Yes. Then I opened my closet and pushed aside the practical scrubs and comfortable shoes that had become my uniform. In the back, preserved in plastic, hung the black dress I'd worn to Raymond's funeral. Classic, elegant, severe. I hadn't had occasion to wear it since. It would do nicely for a different kind of ending. Caleb was already waiting when I arrived at the cafe, his silver hair neatly combed, his suit impeccable as always. He stood when he saw me, that old-fashioned courtesy Raymond had shared. For a moment, I saw concern flash across his face. Perhaps I looked more tired than usual, but he covered it with a warm smile. "Cora," he said, pulling out my chair. "It's good to see you." I ordered tea while he had his usual black coffee. We exchanged pleasantries, his daughter's new baby, my garden's early tomatoes, before I placed the invitation on the table between us. "My children's company," I said simply. "I understand Peterson Capital is one of their investors." Caleb picked up the invitation, his expression carefully neutral. "Yes. We invested in their Series B round about 3 years ago. It's been quite successful." He looked up at me. "I didn't realize you were estranged." "That's one word for it," I replied, taking a sip of tea to compose myself. "What do you know about their funding history?" Caleb hesitated. "I'm not sure I should—" "Caleb," I interrupted quietly. "They took everything I had to start that company. Every penny of Raymond's life insurance. They promised me partnership paperwork. It never came." The color drained from his face. "Cora, I had no idea." "Of course you didn't. I never told anyone. Maternal pride, I suppose. Or foolishness." I kept my voice steady. What I need to know is whether they've listed me as an investor in any of their documents. Anywhere at all. Caleb set down his coffee cup carefully. Not that I've ever seen. We conducted thorough due diligence before investing. Their seed round was attributed to personal funds and a small group of angel investors, none named Green. I nodded, having expected as much. And their company valuation now? Conservative estimates put it around $75 million. They're positioning for an IPO next year that could triple that. The number hung in the air between us. The $350,000 I'd given them, my entire future, would be worth millions now if they'd honored their promise. Do you have any documentation of your investment? Caleb asked gently. Just bank transfers and their verbal promise, for whatever that's worth. I smiled thinly. Not much in a courtroom, I imagine. Caleb leaned forward. Cora, if what you're saying is true, this is serious. It's securities fraud, for one thing. Misrepresentation to investors. If they deliberately concealed your seed funding from subsequent investors. I'm not interested in legal battles, I said, cutting him off. I'm too old and too tired for that, and they're still my children, however much they've disappointed me. Then what do you want? What did I want? Acknowledgement? An apology? My money back with interest? None of those seemed adequate for the depth of the betrayal. I want to attend this party, I said finally, and I want you to be my escort. Caleb looked surprised, then thoughtful. As your financial advisor? As my friend, I corrected. A friend who happens to be one of their major investors. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Cora, just be there, I said. That's all I'm asking. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Of course. I'll pick you up at 7. We finished our drinks with lighter conversation, but I could feel Caleb watching me, reevaluating everything he thought he knew about my relationship with my children. When we parted outside the cafe, he held my hand a moment longer than necessary. Whatever you're planning, he said quietly, be careful. They're quite ruthless in business. I've seen it firsthand. I squeezed his hand. I raised them. I know exactly what they're capable of. The week before the party crawled by. I worked my shifts, tended my garden, and prepared with the methodical patience that had served me well through decades of nursing. I took my old dress to be altered and pressed. I visited the salon for the first time in years, having my silver hair shaped into something elegant rather than merely practical. I withdrew a significant portion of my remaining savings for what I needed to do next. 3 days before the event, I visited Anthony Morgan, an old family attorney who had handled Raymond's will. He listened without interruption as I outlined what I needed, his expression giving nothing away. It's unorthodox, he said when I finished, but legal, provided we have the documentation in order. We will, I assured him. Can you have it ready by Saturday? For Raymond's wife? Of course. He paused. Mrs. Green, are you certain this is what you want to do? Family disputes can— This isn't a dispute, Anthony, I corrected him gently. This is a correction. Sometimes the books need balancing, that's all. He nodded, not entirely convinced, but professional enough not to argue. I'll have everything prepared. Will you be attending alone? No, I said. Caleb Peterson will be accompanying me. Anthony raised his eyebrows but said nothing more. The night of the party arrived with unseasonable warmth for September. Caleb picked me up in his Audi, looking distinguished in his tuxedo. His eyes widened appreciatively when he saw me in my altered black dress, now fitted perfectly to my still slender frame, my hair styled, a touch of makeup enhancing my features. Cora, he said softly, you look beautiful. Thank you, I replied, accepting his arm. Let's not be late. The drive downtown was quiet, both of us lost in thought. As the Ritz-Carlton came into view, its facade lit up against the darkening sky, Caleb finally broke the silence. You never told me what happened between you and your children, he said. Beyond the investment issue. I watched the city lights blur past the window. There's not much to tell. They grew up, they moved on. They decided I wasn't useful anymore. Except for my money. I turned to face him. It's a common enough story. Not in my experience, Caleb said, his voice gentle but firm. Not with a mother like you. We pulled up to the valet stand before I could respond. Caleb came around to open my door, offering his arm again as we walked into the hotel. I felt curiously calm, like the moments before administering a difficult but necessary treatment to a patient. The pain would come, but it would be healing pain. The ballroom was already crowded with men in dark suits and women in cocktail dresses, the air heavy with expensive perfume and the particular laughter of people who believed themselves successful. A banner bearing the Horizon Innovations logo hung above a small stage at the far end. "Cora!" Rebecca's voice, surprised and slightly alarmed. She approached us, resplendent in a red designer dress, her dark hair swept up elegantly. She air-kissed my cheek, her eyes already moving past me to Caleb. "Mr. Peterson, we didn't know you were coming with my mother," she said, her voice honey-sweet with ambition. "What a lovely surprise." "The pleasure is mine," Caleb replied smoothly. "Your mother and I have been friends for many years." Rebecca's smile faltered slightly at the emphasis on friends, but she recovered quickly. "Well, we're so glad you could both make it. Lucas will be thrilled." As if summoned, my son appeared at his sister's side, handsome in his tuxedo, his father's eyes assessing me coolly. "Mom," he said, nodding. "You clean up nice." He turned to Caleb, extending his hand. "Mr. Peterson, always good to see our most valued investor." I watched my children fawn over Caleb, barely acknowledging my presence except to cast occasional wary glances my way. They were wondering why I had come, why their mother, the nurse, was standing in their gleaming world of success, why I had brought one of their investors as my date. "The program will be starting soon," Rebecca said finally. "We've reserved seats for you both near the front." Her eyes flicked to mine. "We thought you'd enjoy seeing what real accomplishment looks like." There it was again, that phrase from the invitation. My son's smirk confirmed he was the author. "I'm looking forward to it," I replied, my voice even. Caleb offered me his arm again, and we followed my children to our table. As we walked, he leaned close to my ear. "Are you all right?" he murmured. I smiled, feeling the weight of the envelope in my small evening bag. Never better. Our table was indeed near the front, offering a perfect view of the stage where my children would no doubt celebrate themselves. We were seated with 3 other couples, all investors, I gathered from their conversation. I recognized a few faces from business journals, tech executives, venture capitalists, people who moved money rather than made things, people unlike me. I sat quietly as Caleb made introductions. "Cora Green," he said simply, without explaining my connection to Horizon's founders. I saw the assumptions form behind their eyes. A girlfriend, perhaps, or a family friend. No one imagined I could be the twins' mother. I had none of their polish, none of their calculated charm. "Drinks." A server appeared with champagne flutes on a silver tray. I accepted one, sipping slowly as I observed the room. At least 300 people filled the space, all celebrating my children's success. Success built on my sacrifice, my investment, my betrayal. "Are you familiar with Horizon's work?" asked the woman beside me, a sleek blonde in her 40s with diamond studs that caught the light as she moved. "Very," I replied with a small smile. "I've followed their progress from the beginning. Cynthia's fund was part of the Series C round," her husband explained proudly. "Such a brilliant concept," Cynthia gushed. "Disrupting medical supply chains with AI, who would have thought? And they built it from nothing. Truly self-made success stories." Caleb's hand found mine under the table, a gentle pressure of reassurance. Or perhaps restraint. "Self-made," I repeated, keeping my voice light. "Yes, that's what they call themselves." Shh. The lights dimmed then, saving me from further conversation. A spotlight illuminated the stage where a man in an expensive suit introduced himself as the evening's MC. He welcomed everyone to Horizon Innovations' 5th anniversary celebration, speaking of visionaries and game changers and paradigm shifts in the healthcare industry. On cue, the crowd applauded as Lucas and Rebecca took the stage, looking every inch the successful entrepreneurs. My son adjusted the microphone, his smile practiced and confident. "5 years ago, my sister and I had an idea," he began. "A simple idea, really. What if we could bring cutting-edge technology to the outdated world of medical supply logistics? What if we could ensure that every hospital, every clinic, every patient received exactly what they needed, when they needed it? Rebecca stepped forward. We knew it wouldn't be easy. Everyone told us it couldn't be done, that the system was too entrenched, too resistant to change. But we believed, Lucas continued. We believed so strongly that we put everything on the line. We invested every penny we had into making this dream a reality. Every penny they had. I felt something cold crystallize in my chest. The early days were tough, Rebecca said, her voice catching in practiced emotion. We worked out of my apartment, eating ramen, coding until 3 a.m, wondering if we'd made the biggest mistake of our lives. I thought of my double shifts at the hospital during those same early days, my arthritic hands aching as I counted out medications, my worry about making the mortgage after emptying my retirement account for them. They continued their carefully choreographed story, taking turns describing their journey from scrappy startup to industry disruptor. They thanked their early believers, angel investors who saw their potential when no one else did. Not once did they mention their mother, the nurse who had given them everything to start. And now, Lucas said, his voice swelling with pride, we want to recognize the key partners who helped us reach this milestone. They began calling companies and investors to the stage, presenting each with a small crystal award. Peterson Capital was third on their list. Caleb Peterson, Rebecca announced warmly, one of our earliest major backers and a tremendous mentor to us personally. Caleb squeezed my hand once more before rising to accept the award. He mounted the steps, shook my children's hands, and turned to the microphone. Thank you, he said simply. Horizon Innovations represents the kind of visionary thinking we at Peterson Capital are always seeking to support. But true success isn't just about good ideas or even good execution. He paused, his eyes finding mine in the audience. It's about integrity, about honoring those who helped you along the way. All of those who helped you. Lucas's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. Rebecca glanced at her brother, a momentary uncertainty passing between them. Caleb nodded politely and left the stage, returning to his seat beside me as the presentations continued. Several more investors were recognized, each receiving polite applause. The awards portion was clearly building to something. My children's ultimate moment of self-congratulation, no doubt. And finally, Lucas said after the last investor had returned to their seat, we have a special announcement to share with all of you tonight. Rebecca stepped forward, her smile radiant under the spotlight. As many of you know, we've been preparing for the next phase of Horizon's growth. Today, we're thrilled to announce that we've accepted an acquisition offer from MedTech Global for $250 million. Excited murmurs rippled through the crowd. The blonde woman beside me gasped in delight. This partnership will allow Horizon's technology to scale globally, Lucas continued, while providing an exceptional return to our loyal investors who believed in us from the start. My stomach tightened. They were selling the company. My investment, the one they had never acknowledged, would disappear into the structure of a multinational corporation, buried forever under layers of legal paperwork. But before we close this chapter, Rebecca said, we want to invite someone very special to join us on stage, someone whose support has meant everything to us. For one irrational moment, I thought they were going to call my name, that some shred of decency had survived in them, that they were going to publicly acknowledge their debt to me at last. Instead, they called their former professor, the man who had introduced them to their first angel investor. He joined them on stage to thunderous applause, beaming as they presented him with an oversized crystal award. Dr. Winters saw our potential before anyone else, Lucas declared. He believed in us when we had nothing but an idea and determination. I felt Caleb tense beside me. He leaned close to my ear. Are you ready? He murmured. I nodded, my hand tightening around my evening bag. The professor was making a speech now, praising my children's extraordinary talent and uncompromising work ethic. He spoke of their bootstrapped beginnings and remarkable self-reliance. I rose from my seat, smoothing my dress with steady hands. Caleb stood as well, offering his arm once more. We walked together toward the stage, unhurried but purposeful. I could feel eyes turning to watch us, whispers following in our wake. My children noticed our approach. I saw the moment of confusion on their faces, followed quickly by alarm. Rebecca whispered something to Lucas, who gave a sharp, barely perceptible shake of his head. We reached the steps to the stage as the professor finished his remarks. The audience applauded, but the sound was muted now, curiosity about our interruption spreading through the room. "Lucas, Rebecca," Caleb called pleasantly, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "I believe there's one more person who should be recognized tonight. Someone without whom Horizon Innovations would never have existed at all." Lucas stepped forward, his expression a careful mask of professional courtesy overlaying panic. "Mr. Peterson, we're actually just wrapping up the formal program." "This will only take a moment," Caleb interrupted, still smiling. "And I think your investors will be particularly interested." Rebecca moved to her brother's side, a united front against the unexpected disruption. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately after the ceremony," she suggested, her voice honeyed but her eyes hard. "I'm afraid it can't wait," I said, speaking for the first time. "Not with the acquisition announcement." They stared at me, their mother, as if I were a stranger who had crashed their celebration. In that moment, they were strangers to me as well, not the children I had raised, but cold-eyed adults who had calculated my worth and found it wanting. I took the first step onto the stage. The spotlight felt hot on my skin as I stood on the stage. 300 faces turned toward me, curious, confused, waiting. Lucas's face had gone rigid, a pulse visibly throbbing at his temple. Rebecca maintained her professional smile, but her eyes were glacial. The professor, sensing something amiss, had stepped back, uncertain of his role in this unscripted moment. Caleb stood beside me, a solid presence at my right shoulder. He took the microphone from its stand and spoke with the easy authority of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. "For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting her, this is Cora Green." He paused, allowing the name to register. "Mother of Lucas and Rebecca Green, and the original seed investor in Horizon Innovations." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I watched recognition dawn on some faces, confusion on others. My children's expressions remained frozen, calculating. Lucas recovered first, stepping forward to reclaim the microphone with a forced laugh. "There seems to be some confusion. Our mother has always been supportive, of course, but the company's funding history is well documented in our SEC filings." "Indeed it is," Caleb agreed pleasantly, "which makes its inaccuracy all the more troubling." Rebecca moved to her brother's side. "Mr. Peterson, while we appreciate your concern, this hardly seems the appropriate venue. I gave you $350,000 to start this company," I said, not loudly, but my voice carried in the tense silence. "Every penny of your father's life insurance money, my entire retirement." The buzz in the room grew louder. I saw several investors leaning together, whispering urgently. A woman near the front was filming on her phone. "Mom," Lucas said, his voice tight, "you made a personal loan. It was repaid with interest. We have the records. You have forgeries." I corrected him calmly. "The only money you ever returned to me was $5,000 for my 65th birthday. You called it a gift." Rebecca's professional demeanor cracked slightly. "This is ridiculous. We built this company from nothing. 16-hour days, 7 days a week. While I worked double shifts at the hospital," I finished for her. At 73, with arthritis in both hands. The silence in the ballroom had taken on a different quality now, charged, uncomfortable. I could feel the audience shifting from curiosity to something else, something that felt like judgment. Lucas stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "What do you want? Money? Is that it? You could have asked privately instead of creating this spectacle." I looked at my son, really looked at him, the boy who had once climbed into my lap after scraping his knee, who had sobbed against my shoulder when his father died. I searched for some remnant of that child in the cold-eyed man before me and found nothing. "What I want," I said clearly, "is acknowledgement. Recognition for what I sacrificed to give you your start." Rebecca made a dismissive sound. "So that's what this is about? Your name on a plaque?" Your photo on our website? She shook her head, incredulous. After all we've accomplished, you're upset about not getting enough credit? I turned to Caleb, who nodded encouragingly. I reached into my evening bag and withdrew the envelope Anthony Morgan had prepared. From it, I removed several documents and handed them to Caleb, who stepped forward to the microphone once more. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, I have here notarized copies of bank transfers from Mrs. Green's personal account to her children, in the amount of $350,000, dated 6 years ago. There is also a letter, written in Lucas Green's hand, promising his mother founder-level equity in the company they were forming. He held up the papers so those in the front rows could see them. What Mrs. Green has not yet shared is that these documents were submitted 3 days ago to the Securities and Exchange Commission, along with a formal complaint alleging securities fraud. The room erupted. Several people stood, phones in hand. I saw one man, whom I recognized as Medtech's CEO, signaling urgently to an assistant. My children's faces had gone bloodless with shock. You wouldn't, Lucas whispered hoarsely. I already have, I replied. Rebecca lunged forward, reaching for the documents, but Caleb smoothly handed them to Anthony Morgan, who had appeared at the edge of the stage. The attorney nodded to me before disappearing back into the crowd with the evidence safely in hand. The SEC takes a dim view of undisclosed seed investors, Caleb continued over the growing commotion, particularly when a company is in acquisition talks. Such omissions could be seen as material misrepresentation, potentially invalidating all subsequent funding rounds. You're destroying everything, Rebecca hissed at me, no longer bothering to hide her fury. Years of work, all because you need to feel important? No, I said. I'm simply balancing the books. Lucas grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh. Do you have any idea what you've done? He demanded, his voice shaking with rage. The MedTech deal will collapse. Our investors could sue us. We could face criminal charges. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Let go of me, Lucas. Something in my tone made him release me instantly, taking a step back. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not of legal consequences, but of me, of what else I might have planned. Mrs. Green, called a voice from the crowd. A woman in a severe suit had risen from a table near the back. Christina Zhao, SEC Regional Office. We'd be very interested in speaking with you further about this matter. So, Anthony had made the calls as promised. Good. Of course, I replied calmly. More people were on their feet now. The MedTech CEO was making his way toward the exit, his face thunderous. Several investors were demanding answers from anyone who looked official. The carefully orchestrated evening was disintegrating into chaos. Through it all, my children stood frozen, watching their empire crumble in real time. The triumph of the acquisition announcement had curdled into public disaster in a matter of minutes. The MC rushed onto the stage, trying desperately to regain control. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could please... His words were lost in the growing tumult. Lucas turned to me, his expression haunted. Why now? He asked, his voice barely audible. After all this time, why would you do this tonight? I stepped closer, close enough to see the tiny scar above his eyebrow from when he'd fallen off his bike at 7, close enough that only he could hear my answer. You invited me to see what real accomplishment looks like, I told him, meeting his gaze squarely. So I thought I'd show you. His face contorted with a complex emotion, rage, realization, perhaps even a flicker of shame. But I was already turning away, taking Caleb's offered arm as we descended the steps. We walked through the pandemonium, past shocked faces and urgent conversations, past security personnel moving in and PR representatives trying to contain the damage. No one stopped us. No one even seemed to notice the elderly nurse and her distinguished escort making their quiet exit from the chaos they had unleashed. In the relative quiet of the hotel lobby, Caleb looked down at me. Are you all right? I considered the question as we walked toward the doors. Behind us, raised voices echoed from the ballroom. Ahead, the night air beckoned, cool and clean. I will be, I said finally. Outside, the valet brought Caleb's car. As he held the door for me, I paused. looking back at the gleaming facade of the hotel where my children's carefully constructed narrative was unraveling thread by thread. "What happens now?" Caleb asked as we pulled away from the curb. I watched the hotel recede in the side mirror. "They'll attempt damage control. They'll claim I'm confused, vindictive, mentally unstable. They'll offer me money to retract my statement. And will you?" I turned to look at him, this man who had helped me deliver justice without judgment. "No," I said simply. "Some debts can't be repaid with money." The city lights blurred as we drove, silent towers of glass and steel against the night sky. I felt neither triumph nor sorrow, just a curious lightness, as if something long carried had finally been set down. The media coverage began the next morning. Tech startup scandal. Founders accused of defrauding their own mother ran the headline in the business section. By noon, it had spread to national outlets. By evening, it had become a symbol of everything wrong with startup culture. The hubris, the myth-making, the casual cruelty hidden beneath inspirational success stories. I watched it unfold from the quiet of my small house, fielding calls from Anthony Morgan about the SEC investigation and declining interview requests from journalists. I had said what needed to be said on that stage. The rest would follow its natural course. 3 days after the party, as I was deadheading roses in my garden, a black SUV pulled up outside my home. Rebecca emerged from the passenger side, wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy day. She stood at the edge of my yard, seeming uncertain about crossing that boundary. "Mom," she called. Not Cora anymore. I continued snipping dead blooms, dropping them into my basket. "Rebecca." She came closer, stopping a few feet away. "You need to retract your statement to the SEC." I looked up at her. Gone was the polished executive from the party, replaced by a woman who appeared not to have slept in days. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, her face bare of makeup. "I won't be doing that," I said, returning to my roses. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Her voice cracked. "The MedTech deal is suspended pending investigation. Our Series C investors are threatening to sue for misrepresentation. Our stock options are worthless." I nodded, unsurprised. "Actions have consequences." "This isn't just about the money," she exclaimed. "Our reputations are ruined. No one will work with us again. Lucas's wife is talking about taking the kids and going to her parents." I met her gaze steadily. "That sounds difficult." Rebecca stared at me, seemingly bewildered by my lack of reaction. "Jesus, Mom, I know we hurt you. I know we should have been more appreciative. But this? Destroying everything we've built? Destroying our lives?" "I didn't destroy anything," I corrected her gently. "I simply told the truth about how it was built." She paced in a small circle, agitated. "We can make this right. We'll pay you back, the full amount plus interest. We'll give you shares in the company, 10%. That's worth—" She stopped, realizing. "Well, it was worth millions before you torpedoed us." I set down my garden shears and removed my gloves, giving her my full attention. "Tell me something, Rebecca. In all these years, why did you never acknowledge my investment? Not in your company records, not to your other investors, not even in your speeches about your bootstrapped beginnings." She looked away, her mouth tightening. "It would have complicated things." "How? By giving me credit? By admitting you didn't do it all yourselves? By linking the company to a 70-something nurse with no tech background?" She burst out. "Do you have any idea how image-conscious this industry is? How investors shy away from anything that doesn't fit the Wunderkind narrative?" I absorbed this, feeling neither surprise nor additional hurt. It was merely confirmation of what I had always suspected. I had been edited out of their story because I didn't fit the image they wanted to project. "So you lied," I said simply. "We omitted," she corrected, as if the distinction mattered. And then it was too late to correct the record without raising questions about our credibility. I returned to my gardening, pulling a weed that had sprung up between my prized tea roses. "Your credibility," I observed, "seems to be in question regardless." Rebecca made a sound of frustration. "What do you want, Mom? Just tell me what you want and we'll make it happen. Money? Recognition? We'll put your name on the company website, issue a public statement about your contribution. Whatever it takes." I straightened. feeling the familiar ache in my lower back, but ignoring it as I always did. "What I want," I said, "is not something you can give me now." "Then why?" She removed her sunglasses, revealing reddened eyes. "Why did you do this if not to get something? What was the point?" I considered my daughter, this stranger who shared my blood but none of my values. I thought of all the ways I might answer her. I could speak of justice, of consequences, of the bitter lesson that integrity matters. I could remind her of the little girl who once broke her piggy bank to buy soup when I was sick. I could ask when that child had been replaced by the woman who would discard her mother when it became convenient. Instead, I said, "Some debts can't be repaid." She flinched as if I'd struck her. "So that's it? You've had your revenge and now we just— What? Lose everything while you go back to gardening? I imagine you'll land on your feet," I said. "You and Lucas are nothing if not resourceful." Rebecca stared at me for a long moment. I saw a series of emotions cross her face: anger, disbelief, calculation, and finally a cold acceptance that mirrored my own. "You know," she said quietly, "Dad would be ashamed of what you've done." If she had hoped to wound me with Raymond's memory, she failed. I knew my husband better than she ever had. "Your father," I replied, "taught you both that family comes before business." It seems that lesson didn't take. Something shifted in her expression then. Not remorse exactly, but perhaps the first glimmer of understanding that what had happened was not merely a transaction gone wrong, but a profound moral failure. Without another word, she turned and walked back to the waiting SUV. I watched her go, feeling nothing but the cool autumn breeze on my face and the distant satisfaction of accounts settled. The legal proceedings took nearly a year. The SEC investigation led to fines, settlements with investors, and the complete dissolution of the acquisition deal. Horizon Innovations survived, but only barely, and under new management. My children were forced out by their board, their golden future replaced by cautionary tale status in the tech world. I received what was legally mine, though the amount was far less than what my initial investment would have been worth had they honored their promise. The money wasn't the point. It never had been. Caleb remained steadfastly by my side throughout, his friendship deepening into something more as the months passed. We never spoke of marriage. We were both too old for such ceremonies. But he moved into my small house, bringing his books and his quiet wisdom and his way of making coffee exactly as I liked it. My children did not contact me again after that day in the garden. I heard about them occasionally through mutual acquaintances or news articles. Lucas's marriage ended, as Rebecca had predicted. He moved to Seattle to work for a former competitor at a fraction of his previous salary. Rebecca started a consulting firm that struggled to find clients willing to overlook her history. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings as Caleb and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I thought about what might have been. Not with regret, I had none, but with a certain wondering about the paths not taken. If they had acknowledged me from the beginning, if they had shown even a modicum of gratitude or respect, if they had remembered, even once, that I was more than a convenient source of capital. But they hadn't. And in their failure, they had taught me my final lesson as a mother, that love without justice is merely sacrifice, and sacrifice without recognition becomes erasure. I refuse to be erased. So that's my story. Not one with a happy ending, perhaps, but a necessary one. When people ask me if I ever regret what I did, I tell them the truth. The only thing I regret is waiting so long to demand what was rightfully mine. Not just the money, but the acknowledgement of my contribution. Some call it revenge. I call it correction. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's that you should never let anyone, not even those you love most, make you invisible. Your contributions matter. Your sacrifices deserve recognition. And if that recognition isn't freely given, sometimes you have to stand up and take it. Life is too short to let others write you out of your own story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I'd especially like to hear from other parents who found themselves edited out of their children's narratives. Remember, we may be older, but we're far from powerless. Until next time, this is Cora Green, signing off.